All right, everybody, welcome to the C3 Recruits podcast. Every month, my subscribers get a podcast, a newsletter, unlimited access to me through a messaging system on the C3 site. And today, we're going to be talking about maybe the most important part of high school sports is the weight room. There's no shortcuts to the weight room. I have an expert in the field here, Jim Krumpos from the University of Arizona. He's been all over the place. Big time spots, right? I mean, Charlotte, Fullerton, obviously historically one of the best programs in the country for baseball. Miami, right? Big time everything, basketball, baseball, football, you name it. And now at the University of Arizona, who also seems to be playing for a Super Regional College World Series berth every year. So, Jim, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, can you kind of dive into your background? I know you've been involved, obviously, at different schools, different sports. Just take a minute or two to talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I've been doing this 26 years now. Started in 1999. Started here at University of Arizona. This is actually my third time back here. This is my alma mater, and I'm from Phoenix, so this is a place where I really like to be and love being a Wildcat. And yeah, kind of like you mentioned, I've been at a lot of different places, trained every team from women's golf and women's tennis and to football and wrestling and gymnastics and all those things. Baseball has just been one that's been on my plate the longest and the most consistently, and one that I've enjoyed. These guys are generally good athletes to work with. They want to train. They understand the importance of training hard in the weight room. They get after it every day. And I think really, in my era growing up, like that, that Barry Bonds and McGuire era, like really got baseball moving forward big time in the weight room. And that's changed a lot since I've been doing this. We really pride ourselves here on working hard. Like you said, the work is the work. Yeah. You can't get around that, but doing it in a way that's smart, doing that in a way that coincides with what makes different pitchers, different position guys special, not doing things in here that's going to be detrimental to performance. But I love this realm of 18 to 22-year-olds because this is usually for most of them, this is the first time in their life they're training consistently, and they need to develop and they need to get in the weight room and train. It's a little bit different mindset the next level where you have some guys that are already kind of developed physically, and it's a little bit more of a mindset of keeping them healthy and keeping them able to play, all the games that they're going to play year round, where this level is a great fit for me. I enjoy doing it.
Yeah. It is a lot different than it has been in the past. And I tell people all the time, how things are, now versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago, right? The one constant that has been in sports is everybody is getting more physical. And I think it's really hard for these high school kids to understand what that work ethic is like. And I wanted to start off talking about freshmen, right? What do you see that you need to work on when a freshman steps on campus at University of Arizona trying to compete with those guys that are maybe 3, 4, 5 years older than them? What are 2 or 3 things that you think are pretty consistent that you say, I need to work on this with these freshmen almost for all of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that, one thing we do an amazing job of here is, our head coach, Chip Hale, like he tells these guys from when they get here on campus the first day, the best thing you can do to be a better baseball player this fall is to get bigger and stronger in the weight room. And so that's our mentality from day one with our guys here. Like we need to get bigger and stronger. I think for incoming guys, the kind of the common themes that I see is that they've just been inconsistent. They've trained really hard for a couple months in the off season, then season starts and they basically don't train at all. Or then they get in their travel ball teams or whatever it is, and their schedules are so busy, they're just not consistent with the training. So that's problematic. Where one of the things I recommend for the young guys is keep a very simple program, and maybe it's only twice a week for 40 minutes, but just be consistent with it. Don't just take these times where you're taking months off and just continue to make slow and steady progress.
Yeah.
I think another common theme I see is, they come in and they've had inflated numbers, inflated exercises. They're only doing partial range of motion, and the emphasis is to go too heavy, and the technique is not good. I'd rather have someone come in here who is very structurally balanced, and I'll talk about that in a second as my third thing. It has good mechanics and good mobility and good range of motion through lunge and squat patterns, and just been doing body weight stuff, than someone who's done a bunch of partial range of motion stuff, very heavy, and has created imbalances and has some structural balance issues. And that's my third thing is the other thing you'll see is guys come in and like they've done bench press and biceps. Well, they've trained the muscles so they look good, and there's a component of looking good, feeling good, playing good. But as a baseball guy, you've got to be very cognizant of your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, and the structural balance of the upper body, and making sure that your posture is good, your rotator cuff is good, your back muscles are strong, you're not getting lean forward, you have good posture from the side. Those are things that your rhomboids are strong and can move. Those are the things that keep your arm and elbow healthy. Not just doing a bunch of bench and bicep stuff. That will actually end up causing issues for you at some point. Or they've only trained the front of their legs, but their glutes and hamstrings are underdeveloped. Like at the end of the day, good athletes have strong hips, big glutes, strong hamstrings, and strong back. Those posterior things that you don't see that are the more difficult muscles to train, that are more exhausting. Those are the things that help you become a better athlete. So the people almost train the opposite way, I find, until they get here.
Yeah. I remember when I was in high school, and I was never the strongest dude, but I remember when I put up 300 pounds on the squat rack for the first time in high school. And I thought I was so proud of myself. It was towards the end of my senior year. And then I
Yeah.
went to college in the fall, and I couldn't even come close to 300 pounds because I did 300 pounds, but I maybe went down like 4 or 5 inches. My range of motion was just not
Right.
there, but it was acceptable in the high school weight room. So I think that is
Yeah.
something that is absolutely huge. And probably you'd know better than me. It also leads to more injuries, right? If these guys aren't getting their full range of motion mobility, I would imagine they're not in the best shape to where it's probably going to lead to more injuries down the road.
100%, because that the muscles getting stronger and tighter in that range of motion. And the other thing that most high school guys don't do a good job of is stretching and mobility work and taking care of their bodies. We spend 15, 20 minutes warming up here properly, going through a full mobility activation routine, making sure all the movement patterns are good before we load them. And to your point, they don't do that in high school. They don't warm up very well. They jump in, they do a bunch of weight for partial range of motion. And when you do that, especially when you're trying to then go out and do athletic movements where you need to be really strong and stable in end ranges of motion, that's problematic. And for a little while, they can get away with it, but it catches up with them eventually, especially closer to the end of their, high school career, when they start to develop more. So, yeah, like I said, I'd much rather have somebody who can do multiple different squats with different foot positions through good range of motion, keeping their low spine in neutral, getting good knee flexion extension, than seeing somebody who is doing like a powerlifting squat with 300 pounds. Like, the correlation into that and athletic performance is very low.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that these next 3 months are so big for all athletes, right? I mean, high school, college, right? The baseball on-field activity kind of slows down, so this is kind of the 3 months where they can really dive in and get aggressive, lifting a little bit more. But I do see a lot of issues with the high school kids that go into February and their high school season starts, and then all of a sudden June hits and they're all over the place traveling for travel ball, and same thing in the fall. And they're getting, 1 to 3 workouts a weekend when, just like you said, like they could get a ton of body weight stuff done in their bedroom or in the weight room and still kind of get range of motion mobility stuff that's really valuable. But from the kind of November-ish through January timeline, what does a strength program look like for a high school baseball player, would you say?
That's a great question. I think, it's a little bit dependent on what is their quote unquote training age. What have they been doing previously, right? I think um, if it's someone who's been doing stuff consistently the right way, which there is some high schools starting to get better. There is more high school strength coaches and that kind of stuff. I think baseball's still very neglected. I think a lot of the high school stuff is really tailored towards football, unfortunately, and it's a different animal. So I think, just in general, like 75% of the sports is your belly button to your knee, right? Are you strong in the hips like we talked about? Are you strong in the growing area? Can you rotate well? Is your posterior chain strong? So really focusing on hips, glutes, hamstrings, adductors. I think another really um, neglected thing for high school guys is the single leg stuff.
Yeah.
Can you do different lunge variations, different split squat variations, different single leg strengthening situations? If you think about the sport, pitching, you're driving off of that back leg off in that front leg's in the air. You're getting your power from having a strong back leg. Even hitting. You're in a wide stance. It's not like a squat stance. It's wide. A lot of guys lift that front foot up and load up that back leg. So you got to be strong on one leg. You got to be strong in the frontal plane, which is like that lateral plane, like that side to side. Most traditional strength and conditioning focuses on that sagittal plane, which is kind of that front to back plane. That's good plane to load and to start with, but doing more lateral movements. I would say that really that November, December stuff like should be higher volume, higher reps, because what makes guys sore is high reps or very slow movements or high time under tension. So that's the time of year, like to your point, you're not doing as much baseball stuff. You're not playing in these showcases or in front of scouts where you want to feel good. So get that higher volume stuff in with full range of motion, slow the movements down. Don't be afraid to be sore because you're not doing as much baseball stuff. You can gain some size in those months because generally guys tend to lose weight and lose body mass in season because of the travel,
Yeah.
lack of lifting. You're eating, the eating schedule is more inconsistent. You're on these tournaments and stuff where it's really hard. You're eating concession stand food, so try to get as much weight on and size and volume as you can for 2 months. And then going into that season, then they should be adding more explosive stuff, going into adding some more plyometrics. And the plyometric stuff doesn't have to be super fancy to be effective, especially with guys that haven't been training and have a very low training age. They don't need to do crazy fancy plyos, just doing simple basic stuff, double leg jumps, broad jumps, backwards jumps, single leg jumps, basic medicine ball throws with good effort. That's the key. Good effort, full recovery, and then prepare your body to be explosive. I would also be adding some sprinting work in that, those last 5-6 weeks, doing some base running stuff in addition to your
Yeah.
plyos. So I think 3 days a week of higher volume lifting and then 2 to 3 days a week of plyos and speed stuff. And then also getting your shoulders strong, your rotator cuff strong. Like I said, once again, like I would keep the pressing volume low. I'm fine with pressing. We press here, fine, that's great. But you shouldn't be doing, most guys do like bench, dips, incline, shoulder press, and then they do one back exercise. It should be the opposite. Do one press, but do a vertical pull, do a horizontal pull, do some rotator stuff, do some shoulder strengthening stuff. Those are the things that are going to keep your arm healthy throughout season.
What's your straight bar versus dumbbell? I guess methodology at Arizona. Do you guys bench there or do you dumbbell bench?
We do both. I mean, it depends on the guy. I would say my pitchers don't barbell bench, but over the course of my career, I've had some pitchers that do barbell bench in the off season and don't have any issues. I think a lot of it depends on um, your posture, your mobility. I think the biggest thing is you can do the upper body stuff, but if you have to do the right mobility stuff and the stretching and the mobility stuff in between your exercises or at the beginning and end of the workout, because you don't want to lose that range of motion.
Yeah.
Once you lose that range of motion in the shoulder or the scapula, then you start to run into problems. So there's not an exercise that I think is detrimental, but there's things that people do over time without the proper mobility and stretching. So that's where you run into problems. But I would say in general, we dumbbell bench. We do neutral grip dumbbell bench. It's easier on your shoulders. You get more stability work. You get more range of motion. And we're going to really emphasize the pulling, like I said, horizontal and vertical, scapular retraction, scapular mobility. My pitchers will barbell bench But certain times of the year, like right now, we're in our fall ball phase where I'm pushing them really hard and they're getting really pushed hard on the field.
Hmm.
We back off and we go back to dumbbell bench. So I think just in general, for athletes, I wouldn't be doing more than 20% of my pressing at all with a
Yeah.
barbell. Like that's about it. 20% or so with a barbell. Everything else should be dumbbell for athletes. You need to be strong, and have good range of motion and be stable, and you get that more from the dumbbell work than the barbell work.
Yeah. Are there two or three exercises in particular that are like your favorites for position players versus pitchers, or that you like for both of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like I said, the single leg squat variations. Like starting guys off, like, hey, if they have a low training age, just a split squat, just one leg in front, one leg in back, doing 10 to 12 reps, going through full range of motion, knees almost touching the ground, bringing your hips all the way up. Um, I think, and then once again, lateral frontal plane stuff. I think most guys do a lunge or a squat variation, but doing lateral lunges, doing pistol squats or single leg balance squats, doing some lateral squatting, and then a lot of glute bridging variations, single leg, double leg, loaded, all those type of things. I think that if you're doing single leg stuff and you're doing frontal plane stuff, that's the sport, and that's where you're getting that most of that what they call dynamic correspondence, which is carryover from what you're doing in the weight room to what you're doing on the field. Sport specific training.
Nice. Yeah. No, I love the single leg stuff, and I think, like you said, a lot of these high school kids they don't have what they think. They don't have enough time, is what they think. But a lot of
Yeah.
them don't have enough money to get someone like yourself, right? A strength coach. Maybe their high school doesn't have one available to them. They can't go out and pay a personal strength coach. I've talked to so many families that, individually want to hire me for recruiting consulting. They have a hitting
Yeah.
coach, they have an infield coach. They don't have a strength coach. Like, that's the most
Mhm.
important thing, right? I think for someone to spend their money on a strength coach is more valuable, because your high school coaches and your club coaches can give you the basic knowledge of fielding a ground ball or hitting a ball. Recruiting stuff is, if you're good enough, then a lot of the time you just need to get to the right events and maybe have somebody advocate for you that is already in your corner. So why not spend that money on a strength coach? But for those kids that absolutely can't, right? It's an expense that their parents just don't have the ability to do. What do you recommend for those guys?
Yeah, great question. I think just think about keeping it simple. I mean, like I said, once again, these kids they're still developing. They don't have a very high training age. So you don't need to expose them to a lot of the high end stuff. Like at the end of the day, think about compound movements, which means multi joint movements. Those multi joint compound movements will give you the most hormonal response, the most neurological response, coordination. So stick to those things, and think to the things, stick to those compound movements in the fundamental movement patterns. So you're pressing, you're pulling, you're squatting, you're hinging, and if you did compound movements, if you just did like a good squat pattern, a good lunge pattern, a good press, a good pull, vertical and horizontal, and did sprints consistently, with high volume, your body's going to change. Your nervous system is going to develop. It doesn't really have to be that complicated. I think that good strength conditioning coaches, good trainers understand that fundamentally. And when kids come to them, ultimately the training's not like super exciting. You're not standing with a young kid. You're not standing on a Bosu ball with one leg, jumping onto whatever, with all these bands and all that crazy stuff. They don't need that type of stimulus yet. They just need to do really good compound movements of those 5 movement patterns, high volume, consistently, and progressively get a little bit stronger. So a simple way to do it would just be like, let's just say we're doing 2 days a week. I'm doing one type of squat each day, and I'm doing 3 sets of 10. I'm doing one type of lunge or single leg thing, 3 sets of 10 to 12. I'm pairing that up with a leg curl or a glute thing, 3 sets of 12. I'm doing one vertical push on one day with one vertical pull. The other day, I'm doing one horizontal push, one horizontal pull. Do 3 sets of 10 with those things. Keep the movement slow and controlled, And you can even do the same weight for 2 or 3 weeks. And then once that gets too easy, add 2.5, add 5 pounds. If you just gradually did that and increase, and just stay consistent with it and got good with your nutrition, did a great job with that, you're going to get stronger. You're going to have a good base for wherever you do at the next level. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It's like any sport, right? Can you do the fundamental things really good? Everybody wants to do XYZ, but you're not even good at ABC. Get really good at ABC, and then when you get to the higher levels, then start to add in XYZ. So many guys are worried about adding velo to their pitch. Like, well, you can't even locate your fastball, and you don't even have a secondary pitch. Get good at a secondary pitch, or get good at your curveball and quit trying to throw the ball harder, because we see it all the time at the college level. I think is a perfect example. Like, if you have 2 or 3 pitches and can compete on the mound, you're going to get a lot of guys out, regardless of how fast your fastball is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so true these days in particular, right? Where on the recruiting front for me, I have a lot of kids that, they have high expectations, and parents that have high expectations of wanting to play at University of Arizona. It's like, there's so many things that you have to do before you get to that level, right? And the weight room is probably the most important of all of them, in my opinion. Academics aside, I think the weight room is probably the most important thing. And you touched on this a couple times, but I know you also have a nutrition background, and that's something that a lot of kids at the high school ranks, right? They're eating the snack bar food, like you said. They're going to the fast food restaurants. How important is that as you see these kids get to that 17, 18, 19-year-old age?
Yeah. Well, I think ideally, or fundamentally, like, they don't gain weight the right way. Even though they're training hard, they don't gain weight because they don't eat breakfast. I mean, the number of high school kids that I deal with that don't eat breakfast is like unbelievable. Or they're eating like very low calorie, sugary, carbohydrate crap.
Yeah.
They don't eat consistently throughout the day. I think, there's a couple sayings in this industry, in this fitness or strength and performance industry. Is like, one is you can't out train your diet. And I found that to be 100% true. And, 85% of what you look like is your diet, not your training, and I think even at this level, I struggle with college guys that like don't maximize what we're doing because of the nutrition part, and they get to the next level, they get to the pro level, and they really buy into the nutrition part and go like, oh yeah, this has made all the difference. It's like, yeah, we were trying to tell you that the last 4 years, and now you're figuring it out. So I think really the nutrition part is, like I said, you can't out train it, and it's going to maximize what you look like and how you are able to respond and recover from your hard workouts and from your hard practices and all that. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. It really focuses on hydrating throughout the day, having a plan. I think most high school young guys, they don't even have a plan. They don't know what they're going to do. They're relying on mom and dad or whatever to what they're going to do for food. You'll just be eating consistently, having 4 meals throughout the day. Each one of those meals, you're trying to have a palm-sized serving of protein, a fist-sized serving of carbohydrates, and some fruits and vegetables, and just doing that consistently, trying to get, I'm not even going to get into how many grams of protein. If they're just doing going off that fist, that palm, and fruits and vegetables 4 times a day, and avoid fast food and processed food, like, you're going to be doing great.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing great. If you can just figure those things out and do it consistently and have a plan to accomplish that every day, you'll be heads and tails above 95% of the guys out there.
Yeah, that's I guess the main point I'm getting from this whole conversation is it should be simplified. In the weight room, it can be simplified. The nutrition could be simplified. And I think that's what we're so lost, right? In the recruiting space too. It's such a mess right now. And these kids are getting pulled and pushed in so many different directions. If they can simplify things, it really makes life a lot easier for them. And I think they're going to be more successful. For that kid that's going into his freshman year, right? He has high hopes of playing collegiately, right? 3 or 4 years down the road. What piece of advice would you give that 14, 15-year-old kid right now?
Yeah, that's great. I think from a physical standpoint, like I said, just be consistent. You don't have to do a bunch of complicated stuff. Just get on a basic program and be consistent. twice a week for those 4 years, and with the nutrition and the training, um, and just know that, like, I think the biggest thing is like, for the high school guys, the guys that get to this level, they're able to dominate high school with very little effort, or maybe not very little effort, but not full effort. And then you get here and it's really tough, and you have to, now everybody's really good. And
Yeah.
so just get used to, at the young age, giving that effort. Get used to, at a young age, taking care of your body. The guys that I've seen, we pride ourselves here on, we've had more guys go to the big leagues in the last 10 years than any other program. And the guys that I see that come here that are like, you can just tell, right? Austin Wells is a perfect example. Like, that dude operated like a pro from his first day here. His attention to stretching, mobility, nutrition, taking care of his body, from his first day here was elite. We knew he was only going to be here 2 years and was going to probably be in the big leagues in 4 years. And he just operated differently. Where, like, there's so many talented guys that I've been fortunate enough to be around with that, like, still are just inconsistent with how they eat and how they train and their effort. That it holds them back and it delays their progress. Like, you're going to move from the high school to whatever college, pro level. The guys that move through those ranks the quickest are the most consistent with their effort every day in the weight room, on the field, and how they're taking care of their bodies. It is not rocket science.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all. I mean, so much good information today. I love learning this stuff too, because I love passing it down to the high school kids that I talk to every day. So, Jim Krumpos, Associate Athletic Director of Strength and Performance at the University of Arizona. Quite the resume, 26 years, worked with a ton of big leaguers. Thanks for joining the C3 Recruits podcast today, and hopefully we'll be checking up on each other down the road as you guys win, I don't know, 40 or 50 more games this year.
That'd be awesome, man. Appreciate it. We love that.
Thanks, Jim.